Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion.
We are here with episode 2 of the local coffee buffet. I got here Wyatt, Frasier, and Zachary Page, and they are two of the founders, of the American Legacy Project, which we're going to talk about in a little bit because I saw you guys started this nonprofit, it looks like, where you kind of piggyback on some really cool stories from different vets in all different eras. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I just wanted you guys to kind of give a little intro of who you are and what you guys do, and then we'll kind of roll into just the little coffee buffet sesh here.
Yeah, so I know Aaron. He was in my Beast platoon. This was about almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I guess.
The Beast or Buckner?
Was it Buckner? I don't remember, man. Was it Buckner? Maybe it was Buckner.
Either
way, it was one of these two.
A salty little bastard.
It was who was in your squad? Was Zach was Zach Campy in our platoon?
These are good questions. I'm not sure.
I don't know. It was one summer. They all blend together. Either way, Aaron and I were in a summer training event at West Point, either our first or our second. And Aaron was always, he was always remember you were always kind of the charismatic, salty guy that always, I remember you were salty.
I pulled people down with me, man. I was like, we're all gonna freaking hate this together. That was just cancer.
But we were there at West Point together. This was a while ago. I mean, as you can tell by the fact that we've forgotten everything. But I went for 2 years to West Point, and then I left and did a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Argentina. So I spent 2 years down there, and then I came back and was a member of the class of 2017 and graduated with Zach. That's where I met him. We were both economics majors, so we were in several classes together and knew each other that way. And we'd always talked about doing something afterwards, whether that was business or going to school somewhere else together or something. We kind of had these ideas. And as a cadet, you have almost no time if you're already in a club or two. But once you graduate, we found out that we had a little bit more time as lieutenants, and we were able to do some stuff. So yeah, I'm stationed currently. I'm a medical service corps officer, so it's basically a medical logistician. I know nothing about medicine beyond the few combat lifesaver courses that I take. But I do the logistics. I do the management for the medics inside a cavalry squadron. So I'm in the 140th Cavalry Squadron up here at Fort Richardson, Alaska. Love Fort Richardson. I love Anchorage. It's an amazing place. So if you've never been to Anchorage, you should go from June to September.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's not that great, but
rough winter.
It is, but it's cold. It's cold and dark. But June to September, it's heaven.
That's awesome. I got a couple follow-up questions for you in a second, but let's get to Zach. If you want to just give a little intro on who you are and what you do, man.
Awesome. So, like Wyatt said, I'm a class 2017 from West Point and econ major as well. I'm an air defense artillery officer. I'm stationed in Baumholder, Germany. I do logistics for the battalion.
As it dies, man. That's what's up. 88.
Yeah, it's basically the Air Force.
I
really enjoy it here. Unlike Wyatt, who has a dark period in Alaska times of the year.
What's the weather like? You're in a freaking tank top. Looks like you're outside or something.
Like 70 something right now. Just hanging out on the porch.
Like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Living in this little small village in the middle of the valleys here in Germany.
Well, if this COVID thing winds down, I was hoping to make it out there eventually for like Oktoberfest or something, but if we're ever allowed to travel again, or if the freaking handcuffs come off,
Well, it's just maybe the
vaccine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the vaccine. That'll be the day, right?
It seems like we're gonna need a vaccine. Yeah, I think that's kind of what it's coming to. Like life won't be it'll be like more normal, but like I don't think life will be. I don't foresee personally big crowds above like 100 or 200 people before there's a vaccine.
The thing is too, like
I just can't.
my buddy and I were talking about this last night about like, okay, as real estate investors, how's this going to impact the market? And it's just kind of what we can be all scared and kind of hoard our money or whatever, or you can attack, on the market. Like, what's that going to look like? And we're trying to come up with what kind of creative things are going to emerge out of this for investor, like advanced filtration systems, like your ADA, like in the ECS, you've got, advanced filtration systems that filter out toxins, NBC chemicals, that kind of thing. So it's like, are people going to be getting those in their houses? Is office space going to be like redesigned to the footprint and the layout and the flows all move in a certain way to where you are always social distancing, kind of goofy stuff like that? And it's just, you're right. It's going to be way different. And it's about maybe how this is going to impact what industry you're in and getting creative about those solutions.
Yeah, I think the most impact you'd see is how remote working fits into more people's lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
You might see some people trickle back to the office, but even situations like the WeWork solutions, it's just, we have the technology now to do intelligence work from different places. You don't need to be surrounded by your coworkers for certain jobs. So I think that's the most likely kind of holdover from this that we'll see, is more companies testing the waters and seeing how they can work decentralized.
Yeah. So Wyatt, as a med service officer, I don't know what you're allowed to disclose over Facebook, but like, what are your thoughts?
There's nothing there's nothing that complex that I'm doing at my level. So the medical platoon that I lead is a role 1 in the Army. So if you think that's almost like like the capabilities we have are non-surgical, 2 to 3 hour holds, and no helicopter is ever going to. We would put people on a helicopter, but no helicopter is going to bring people to us. We just don't have any capabilities. So when this whole thing started, several people in my squadron were like, "Oh, are you guys going to deploy? Are you guys going to go support hospitals?" And I was like, "Man, if I deployed into like New York City or something, it would mean like literally every resource in America is being overrun."
Right.
Because it really is. Like, I have a PA who's excellent. He's a former Special Forces medic and knows his stuff, but a doctor is only as good as his equipment. So we don't have ventilators, we don't have surgery tables or anything. We're basically a trauma center that we set up in the woods, in the space of 20 minutes.
Sure. You're like an emergency,
we don't really
quick reaction kind of unit.
Right. I mean, we're 2 to 3 miles from the front lines, and we're basically, the first people that the soldier would see after their medics. We're going to stabilize them, and then we're going to put them on the bird, or we're going to evac them up higher to like an actual field hospital. So as far as like COVID stuff, it really hasn't hit us medically. I mean, we've been doing a little bit of like risk mitigation and things, but really it's just there's not really much we can do. I mean, that's kind of the hard part. Zach and I were talking to someone yesterday about this, that when September 11th happens, you could go out and you could enlist, you could go and you could go and support the troops or whatever, and you could kind of feel like you were doing something to help.
There's something tangible to fight,
Right. Right. With this, it's like, okay, go and sit. And that's especially hard for the Army that's used to like, being very engaged and always moving forward. So they're not used to being told to sit.
My friend and I had a conversation last night, the same one, about the implications of just readiness in general, like about how soldiers are going to be getting out of shape. You're not going to be doing maintenance on your equipment. Just like you're not out there training because people are quarantined. And it's like, that could be a huge, threat as well that I didn't really consider. I was just kind of thinking, the disorganization of like a biological threat for one side of it. But then now I'm like, what does this do for readiness in general? What are your guys' thoughts on
that? We've figured out ways to maintain our somewhat consistent battle rhythm. So for us, and me being in Europe, in Germany, where there's been a little bit of a more mild outbreak hasn't really changed much of our operations. So
How's it so much more mild in Germany when Italy apparently is just burning down right now?
well, you look at some of the demographics. So Italy and Japan and Germany, oldest nations on the planet, but the way that these German villages are, they're so pocketed across. This is just my take on it, and they're so pocketed. People generally follow the rules here, and then they have a robust healthcare system. Um, so they've just managed the crisis, and they really followed their spread in a lot more closely than a lot of other nations did when the outbreak began. So they're able to kind of do that tracking.
Yeah.
But even like my German friends here, they abide by all the rules. It's not like people are sneaking and having parties, kind of like we saw in
Speakeasy,
the States.
prohibition, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty calm and people are relaxing. The weather's nice too, so that can't hurt anything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is certainly a weird time, and it's a heck of a time to be involved with some kind of startup. And so, what you guys are doing, you started this. I believe it's a nonprofit, and correct me if I'm miscommunicating anything, but it's called the American Legacy Project. And I want to hear it in your words. You know what this nonprofit's about, and you know where you guys are looking to go with it, and the vision for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well-
really, it started when this was a couple years ago. So my wife, she is an Army daughter as well as now an Army spouse. And her father, my father-in-law, is a physical therapist in the Army. And she's grown up all around military bases and military people. And she's always been interested in people's stories. She's pretty extroverted. And she always kept this thing called a book of people. And she's like kept it her whole life, she says, where she just kind of writes down people's stories. And
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's just a journal thing that she had.
It's a cool idea.
When we met. Yeah, she's just done it since she was like 10 years old. She said she just writes down interesting things that people say. So she has it in her house. And anyway, I was talking to my platoon sergeant one day, and I told her this story, and talking to my platoon sergeant, and he was about to retire, and he just had all these interesting stories that he would always tell, just little anecdotes to the soldiers. And I was like, hey, Sergeant, you ever written this stuff down? I mean, this stuff's pretty cool. You have 4 kids. What do you think about? Like, what do they think about this? Oh, sir, I don't know. My kids are not even graduated high school yet. Normally, I don't really care. They're just little kids. That dad's in the Army, and he's deployed sometimes, and I don't know. Like, they're more worried about kid stuff. We remember being that age. I was like, well, you should write this stuff down. Eventually they're gonna want this stuff, and eventually, you're not gonna be around anymore, and they're gonna have kids that ask what Grandpa did, and they're gonna have a few stories, but probably not remember much. And he was like, yeah, sir, that's totally true. I haven't written any of this down. I don't even know where to start. Kind of this overwhelming feeling of like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to write down. So I was talking to my wife, and we were like, yeah, there's got to be a way to help someone create, preserve their legacy, even if it's not their entire story. Ideally you could sit with someone for 20 hours, and there's some people that do that, and maybe in your own family that would be a good thing. But even just an hour or so of talking to someone, it can be cathartic for them. It helps them establish their identity, and it also helps you establish your identity, as a person. And so I was talking to Zach, and we had a bunch of different ideas about what we were trying to do, and some of them would work with our battle rhythm. Some of them, were really not feasible while we were active duty. So I called up Zach. I told him the idea, and he was all on board.
So you guys had you were interested in some kind of startup from a long time ago, but so this is a nonprofit where you guys are just documenting the stories, or you're featuring them, or how do we get these stories? How are you getting the stories out there, and what's kind of the mission and the vision for the whole thing?
So it's like a 2-pronged approach, really. There are a lot of organizations that capture stories of veterans and service members, but they don't really offer something to the service member to keep for themselves. So that's what we have with our legacy books, that we have our whole process of connecting, setting up an interview, having some of our volunteers help with the interviews, and our design team curating the book. So we have a product for any veteran that wants to participate or active duty service member.
Right.
But then what I really thought was another way to market the project and bridge the civilian military divide is when Wyatt brought this to me. That's kind of what I saw, like, as we providing these narrative or these snippets of the long form interview that's approved by the service member. But we'll publish these snippets on all of our social media platforms in the hope that we break some social stigmas that might be associated with service, or just show that they're ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the military. And it's not the lion's share of the people in the military aren't on the front lines, but everybody has a story to tell regardless of where they served, and or when they served. And I think these heuristics that people create because of the pressures of service to apply to everyday issues in life, those are valuable for anybody. So that's like with the popularity of Humans in New York, those types of projects. I think we have a great base of content to share with the world, to teach people that may not have any affiliation with the military. So yeah, two-prong approach. We make books and we share the stories with the world.
I think that's really interesting, because you make a good point. There's so much social stigma, if you will, out there about what the military is like, and especially when I transitioned into the civilian world, it was just so much different the way people viewed the military service and somebody that's kind of served for a little bit. And what's cool about what you guys are doing is you're featuring people that have an interesting story and allowing them to build relationships with, this audience of just regular people. And I think that by building that relationship, they're going to start to realize exactly what you said a minute ago, which was that these are just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that's a really cool objective, and it's a really cool mission, because I think that that's not really that obvious to people on the outside. And it's interesting because you'll start to see, I think there's going to be even a bigger cool, aspect to this, because when you look at what a hero is in general too, it is just an ordinary person that does something extraordinary with just split seconds or split decisions, or just little pieces of courage that are interjected into their life. So when you start to feature these people and they share those stories, it's going to be really cool to see how that unfolds with people as they build that relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the biggest things for us has been looking at, as we tried to figure out how are we going to do these interviews and how are we going to make it scalable for, we're not obviously to the point where we're doing, a huge operation, but if we're going to have other people that aren't Zach or me doing these interviews, how can we quality control it and make it beneficial for the interviewer and the interviewees and the people that are going to read those interviews, which, like Zach and I said, primarily will be the people that read those books. That's kind of our focus, is making sure that people's posterity. So if we make a book for you, Aaron, it's going to be the grandkids, kids that you and Marissa someday have, and the lesson. And so we said, okay, what do we need to get? And it's the lessons learned. I mean, you can sit down for if we're only doing this for an hour and a half, what are we trying to really get out of things? And it's those lessons learned. That's what we've really focused on. There's a quote from Johann Hari that Zach and I really like that says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And that's really been something that has been a driving force for us, is that, like you said, that creating this connection among people and connecting that connection between generations. So as children look back at their parents and get an identity from that, and as people get an identity from the stories they tell, that's something that's super helpful to them and to anyone reading that.
Yeah.
So understanding yourself.
It's kind of that Joseph Campbell approach to where the story and the legacy and identity all kind of mix into one thing, and how we use that that piece of psychology to continue to provide a legacy, which is why your name is so brilliant too, the American Legacy Project. It's because it's what does it mean to be a legend? What does it mean to have the go down the hero's journey? And it does resonate with the story itself, and the story itself resonates with the identity itself. And I think that's such a cool tie that you're going to start to highlight here with veterans or heroes or the different types of people that you guys bring on the show. So I think that's a pretty cool thing that you guys have rolling. What have you noticed is one of the bigger challenges in getting started?
Initially, it's initially what the challenge that we had was being on different time zones and cultivating a team of a decentralized team, but it's started to play out as a strength really. With Wyatt in Alaska, I'm in Germany. Well, we have advisors that are in Iowa, New York, DC, cadets now dispersed across the country that are helping us, some civilians littered around the country as well. And then we're interviewing people that are not co-located. So we have been able to figure out through using Slack, Zoom, the G Suite, how to create products and use the time throughout our days to kind of keep the ball rolling on a linear front. So distance was a huge barrier at first.
Sounds like the whole world's dealing with that right now too. So you're not
you're
not alone.
Yeah, I think we've been able to figure it out kind of before this whole this pandemic. So I think it's worked out so far.
So you mentioned the decentralization of the movement has been difficult. What else? Is there anything else that you guys have noticed that other than just the management of the people involved?
So I think that the handling of the bureaucracy. So anyone that wants to start a 501c3, which Zach and I have done, there's several nuances. I would encourage anyone to approach people that have done that, whether that's you're an entrepreneur, Aaron, so you know that legal fees are par for the course. Mm-hmm. Making sure that you are straight will pay dividends in the end, because if you don't do it at first, you're going to have to do it eventually. It might be more expensive and it might be more burdensome. So I would encourage anyone that's starting to either seek out, doesn't even have to be, expensive legal teams or anything, but just make sure that you're talking to people that have done that, because there are a lot of nuances, and that's something that we confronted at first. We found some people that have been able to help us through that. But like Zach said, just making a team. I mean, Zach and I are left-brain people. We were both econ majors, and we like numbers, we like stats. Zach is probably a little bit more design-oriented than I am, but neither one of us is planning on, leaving the Army someday to go and run a design firm or be graphic designers. So what we found is that you have to find people that know how to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And empower them and get them on your team. So, we found a cadet and her friend, Leighton and Jillian. So shout out to those two, because they've now recruited more graphic designers that are helping us make these books and make them look professional and doing stuff that Zach and I would take. I mean, it would take us hundreds of hours to get to the point where they're at. So finding people, utilizing their talents, and then, just being that entrepreneurial journey of like finding that balance between putting your ideas out there and then also enabling someone else to do their best work and managing that growth. So, there's obviously a delicate balance there.
Yep.
And I think Zach and I are learning how to do that, how to empower people that are volunteering for us while also making sure that our vision stays central.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. That's just that ultimate leadership that you guys are kind of showing too. It's just about recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and being able to outsource those types of things that you might struggle with personally. So I was approached this week by a gentleman who was just starting a nonprofit, and he asked me for some advice or tips or whatever. And I've only had experience mostly with just startups, for-profit businesses. So he asked me to sit on the board, and I said, okay, now what advice would you give to someone that's going through the beginning steps of starting a nonprofit? You mentioned getting the legal work straight. You mentioned kind of getting your team in place. Is there any kind of like tactical tip or hack that you would recommend, or a resource or something out there that would be helpful for people who are getting started, something they can go reach out to, or a course or anything? I don't know.
I would say that on the early stages of forming any company, it's really important to do market research, even if it's for a nonprofit, because he could put a lot of effort and dollars into something that may already exist in a region that is, or in a silo that's not is not ready for growth.
Mhm.
So I would caution really uh, coming public with something, or soliciting legal expertise prior to some thorough market research on your idea, like any other business.
Sure. Just finding that demand, making sure that there's a demand
Yeah,
present.
Yeah.
we have an advisor actually that works at a company called LMI. They're a consulting firm, and he's now running kind of a venture capital wing of that firm. And they have hundreds of millions in revenue each year, and they are a nonprofit actually. And so he was talking to us about how, people oftentimes think of nonprofits as only being something like, Zach and I are doing this, to really, our goal for this is not to grow it into, $1 million revenue stream, but this company has. And so the interesting thing for a lot of people is they'll go into nonprofit management, and it doesn't mean that there's not revenue, right? And so it has to be managed like a normal business. There's expenses, there's revenues. Your donors are essentially they're your stockholders.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to expect that their money's used wisely. They're going to expect that you give them something in return. So if your donors, just like a stockholder, expects that they're going to have dividends and they're going to have growth in their shares, your donors are going to expect that your company grows and that they're included in that growth. Whether that's a newsletter, whether that's you showing them, hey, this is how your dollars are used. And it should be done for the person that donated $5 as much as the person that donated $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
But treating it more like a for-profit business, I think, is beneficial, because there are a lot of crossovers, and not, as I mentioned with this venture capital firm / consulting company, there are companies that are very big that you wouldn't guess, but that for whatever tax purposes are classified as nonprofits. Most universities are nonprofits, and there's high revenues there. So
yeah, it could be a huge operation. It could be something small. And I think that's a key point too, to take away for people, that you can grow and be large. It's just a matter of, it's the nonprofit. It's not necessarily non-revenue, right? And I think you made a really interesting point about, treating these donors as if they're shareholders. And I think that's really helpful. Like, people, I think, will donate money if they know what it's going to, they know what it's going to be used for. That if you're very organized with what's the approach, and it's not just being fraudulent or wasteful. And I think that's really what you're looking for when people approach me and they want me to donate money to something. I want to know, what is this money going towards? What is it going to be used for? Be extremely transparent, and that's helpful, I think. And that's what is the best way of raising funds. Do you have any insight on fundraising for a nonprofit, or have you guys gone down that road yet, or are you still looking to get into it a little more?
So we have the foundation in place to do a multi faceted approach. So we've contracted with Fundraise. It's a platform that helps with crowdfunding and creating different campaigns for peer-to-peer donations. So that's kind of one silo that we're using. And then the corporate donations, those are more of a relationship you build over 6 to 9 months. And those are the high dollar donations. But it's a continual learning process, and it's going to be tailored to what that organization does. So for us, with our books, we want to make every person that donates, we want to make it clear to them that regardless of donation size, $5 or $500, you are contributing to capturing a legacy or 100
Mhm.
legacies, and we can send them back snippets or thank you letters from people that were influenced by this donation. So it what I would say is make a multi-tiered approach to fundraising that gives the donor upfront, they know what they're giving you the money for, and then you follow up with some type of actionable um, or something tangible that the donor can say, hey, this is what my money went to, and this is um, and this is what I'm a part of now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think.
I think that's great advice, and it's very helpful for people who might be interested in this. Just the mechanics of it, right? So you said Fundraise was the software that you're using.
It's
Fun.
Yeah.
Like-
as
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Fundraise. There's several different softwares. We like the packages that Fundraise did for us, and their pitch convinced us to go with them. I mean, the other thing that I would add too is like, and this isn't any different than doing a seed round for a for-profit business. The initial investors are going to be friends and family.
Mhm.
One of the advisors joked, that's when you're starting a company, you're going to find friends, families, and fools, like, to put the money in it first. And you as an investor, or you as an investor and an entrepreneur, Aaron, I'm sure you feel that when you first start out, you're like, man, I don't know, I believe in this vision, but it's going to be tough to convince anyone else. And you have to kind of go to your friends and your family and be like, hey, I'm gonna, I think that I could return you some money. And with a nonprofit, it's, hey, I have this vision, and creating a really compelling pitch that's gonna resonate with them. If you go to them and you tell them something that they can't really see the value in the world that they live in, it's tough. So really creating a pitch, and then go into your friends and your family and saying, hey, this is something I'm trying to do. This is why it's going to make a difference. And for us, that's, using that idea of family history. There was a statistic that I always tell people that a Harris poll in 2014 found that 30% of Americans, when their parents either died or were mentally incapable, that they wish that they knew their parents better, which is a pretty tragic statistic. These are people that wanted to know their parents better. So 30%, and 80% of Americans say that they wish they had more information, period. And so talking to people and saying, hey, this is what we're trying to fix. We're trying to make it so that the veterans that have these amazing stories, they don't lose them.
Yeah.
And families and friends have been like, yeah, we're willing to give you some money for that. And we believe in this cause. So not being hesitant to just go to your families and friends with a solid pitch. And then, like Zach said, also have that foundation for a broader fundraising effort. And then also being prepared to go and pitch corporations and, big money donors on how this can also benefit society and the world that they're living in.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting, I thought, that popped across my mind as you guys were sharing, some tips on going about fundraising. But what's interesting about your mission is I saw a stat somewhere that it was about 3 generations is as long as it takes to forget about that generation. So like about you kind of know your grandfather, your great grandfather, and then you basically don't know who your great great grandfather is, for example. And that was something I noticed. And, you see maybe a more broad paintbrush approach with like ancestry.com or something like that, where it's just like, oh yeah, we'll have some records that go back in the time or whatever. What's cool is you guys are going very personal and niche with military veteran families, but you're allowing them to share these stories and legacies so that 3-generation rule doesn't necessarily have to apply forever. There'll be stories and records kept of people with these really heroic journeys in whatever different role. It doesn't necessarily be, it can be heroic in different ways, but they'll have these stories and records kept for life, and they'll be able to hand something like that down. So I think that's a much more personal approach. And I think it's a cool aspect that you're looking at to keep like a generational story going. And I think people might not understand the depth of that, like giving somebody a book that'll stay in the family forever. That'll keep records of family history. It'll just be really cool to see 3 or 4 generations from now, those types of books and records collected and kept,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's been the hope, is that we have this really tangible, really accessible thing that we're giving to these people, so there's family notebooks and family records you have to dig out of your basement. And if you're really committed, you go and you find that stuff. We're trying to bring something that you can put it on your coffee table. Grandkids come over, they pick it up and they read a paragraph. Oh my goodness. And then this conversation starting. They start talking to their grandparents, and their parents say, this is pretty cool. Look at what grandpa did. And it's an identity. We are all part of a tribe. We're part of a community, and your family should be the biggest. So creating an identity is huge, and it's really important. It's not done enough. So,
well, it's a brilliant idea. I applaud you guys for taking a stab at this, and I wish you all the best of luck with this as it grows. I think it's an awesome mission. It's something really cool to get behind. It's just a great thing what you guys are doing. So I just wanted to open it up to you two also, if there's just anything else you want to share on how people can either donate or how they can get in touch with you guys personally to discuss differently. I'll start with you, Wyatt. If you want to just give any information or background that would help people connect with you.
So we are always looking for volunteers to conduct interviews, but also just to help run our organization. And that is anything from transcription to video editing to tech knowledge to legal work. I mean, there's no skill that we aren't in need of, just like any company. So if anyone wants to help, they can go and join the project. We have a website, www.theamericanlegacyproject.org. And up at the top, there's a how you can help button. If you're on your cell phone, it extends down, and you can donate there. You can also you can volunteer and submit a form to get in contact with us. And we encourage anyone that wants to help out to go and use that link. And we'd love to have you on the team.
Yeah. Zach, how about you, man? Anything to get connected with you guys?
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight the social media aspect as well. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I just think that's a good way that people can hop on and see what we're about. And I just want to highlight as well, if you have a family member that you want to capture their legacy, or maybe you are a veteran yourself and you have friends that might be interested in doing the same, just as much as we need volunteers, we need people to be interested in capturing their legacy and help grow the movement that way. The same way you can join the project as a volunteer, it's the same route on our site to donate as well. And probably through the next couple of months, Wyatt and I will be refining that to make it more seamless. But yeah, I think just following us on social media and seeing what we're about and seeing how this movement grows, and an individual can make the decision themselves how they want to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for jumping in. Dan, did you have any final questions? I saw you popped on late.
No, yeah, I know I gave so much to this conversation, but I want to thank you guys for coming on. And I knew I was going to be late today, but let me know, or let Aaron know, and I would love to share all your stuff for your social media stuff. And hopefully we can have you on again in the future. And I really appreciate you talking about your nonprofit as well. I'm actually sitting on that same board that AJ is. So really insightful and good stuff. So sorry for being late, but thanks for coming on again.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll wrap up the local coffee buffet here, but once again, we'll have this repurposed as a podcast, and we'll put a lot of the links to your the different things you guys discussed as far as the website and different ways to get involved in the show notes of the podcast. And you're tagged on Facebook right now, so it's going to be available for people to reshare.